You think that's real? It is conceivable that AI could take control and reach a point where you couldn't turn it off and it would be making the decisions for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, to sum up, in the words of Elon Musk, for all human history, human beings have been the smartest beings on the planet. Now, human beings have created something that is far smarter than they are. And the consequences of that are impossible to predict. And the people who created it don't care. In fact, as he put it, Google founder Larry Page, a former friend of his, is looking to build a, quote, digital god, and believes that anybody who's worried about that is a speciesist. In other words, is looking out for human beings first. Elon Musk responded, as a human being, it's okay to look out for human beings first. And then at the end, he said the real problem with AI is not simply that it will jump the boundaries and become autonomous and you can't turn it off. In the short term, the problem with AI is that it might control your brain through words. And this is the application that we need to worry about now, particularly going into the next presidential election. The Democratic Party, as usual, was ahead of the curve on this. They've been thinking about how to harness AI for political power. Artificial intelligence is one of those topics that's just spooky and sci-fi enough to make for a compelling television segment. They love it on the morning shows. But at the same time, AI is complex enough that it's easy to misrepresent. It sounds like something that could be revolutionary, even dangerous to humanity. But is it? And if it is, what should we do about it? If we're going to have artificial intelligence, and apparently we are, it ought to be open to the world. That would help ensure that it's used for good and not evil. That was the idea. But as the years passed and Musk found himself preoccupied building a couple of enormous companies, SpaceX and Tesla, OpenAI got away from him. As of tonight, OpenAI is no longer open. It's not a nonprofit research project dedicated to using artificial intelligence to serve humanity. It is instead a commercial enterprise backed by Microsoft and controlled to some extent by the Democratic Party. Elon Musk thinks that's a problem. In fact, he believes it's a threat to human civilization, tantamount to, maybe even more terrifying than, thermonuclear weapons.
So I think we should be cautious with AI, and I think there should be some government oversight because it affects it's a danger to the public. Anyway, so I think we should take this seriously, and we should have a regulatory agency. I think it needs to start with a group that initially seeks insight into AI, then solicits opinion from industry, and then has proposed rulemaking, and then those rules, will probably, hopefully, grudgingly be accepted by the major players in AI, and I think we'll have a better chance of advanced AI being beneficial to humanity in that circumstance.
But all regulations start with a perceived danger. Planes fall out of the sky or food causes botulism.
Yes.
I don't think the average person playing with AI on his iPhone perceives any danger. Can you just roughly explain what you think the dangers might be?
Yeah, so the danger, really, AI is more dangerous than, say, mismanaged aircraft design or production maintenance or bad car production, in the sense that it has the potential, however small one may regard that probability, but it is non-trivial. It has the potential of civilizational destruction. There's movies like Terminator, but it wouldn't quite happen like Terminator because the intelligence would be in the data centers.
Right.
The robot's just the end effector. But I think perhaps what you may be alluding to here is that regulations are really only put into effect after something terrible has happened.
That's correct.
If that's the case for AI, and we only put in regulations after something terrible has happened, it may be too late to actually put the regulations in place. The AI may be in control at that point.
You think that's real? It is conceivable that AI could take control and reach a point where you couldn't turn it off and it would be making the decisions for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, that's definitely the way things are headed, for sure. The things like say ChatGPT, which is based on GPT-4 from OpenAI, which is a company that I played a critical role in creating, unfortunately.
Back when it was a nonprofit?
Yes. I mean, the reason OpenAI exists at all is that Larry Page and I used to be close friends, and I would stay at his house in Palo Alto, and I would talk to him late into the night about AI safety. And at least my perception was that Larry was not taking AI safety seriously enough.
What did he say about it?
He really seemed to be one sort of digital superintelligence, basically digital God, if you will, as soon as possible.
He wanted that?
Yes. He's made many public statements over the years that the whole goal of Google is what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence, or artificial superintelligence. You know, and I agree with him that there's great potential for good, but there's also potential for bad. And so if you've got some radical new technology, you want to try to take the set of actions that maximize the probability it will do good and minimize the probability it will do bad things.
Yes.
It can't just be hell for leather. Let's just go, barreling forward and, hope for the best. And then at one point, I said, well, what about, we're going to make sure humanity's okay here. Going with old sayings, the pen is mightier than the sword. So if you have a super intelligent AI that is capable of writing incredibly well and in a way that is very influential, convincing, and is constantly figuring out what is more convincing to people over time, and then enters social media, for example, Twitter, but also Facebook and others, and potentially manipulates public opinion in a way that is very bad. How would we even know?
Long term, AI may become autonomous and take over the world, but in the short term, it's being used by politicians to control what you think, to end your independent judgment and erase democracy on the eve of a presidential election. Elon Musk is very worried about that. He told us about his plan to stop it.
What's happening is they're training the AI to lie.
Yes.
It's bad.
To lie. That's exactly right. And to withhold information.
To lie and comment on some things, not comment on other things, but not to say what the data demands that it say.
Exactly.
So
how did it get this way? I thought you funded it at the beginning. What happened?
Yeah, well, that would be ironic. I came up with the name and the concept and pushed. Had a number of dinners around the Bay Area with some of the people, the leading figures in AI, and I helped recruit the initial team. In fact, the Ilya Sutskever, who was really quite fundamental to the success of OpenAI, I put a tremendous amount of effort into recruiting Ilya, and he changed his mind a few times and ultimately decided to go with OpenAI. But if he had not gone with OpenAI would not have succeeded. I really put a lot of effort into creating this organization to serve as a counterweight to Google. And then I kind of took my eye off the ball, I guess, and they are now closed source, and they are obviously for profit, and they're closely allied with Microsoft. In effect, Microsoft has a very strong say, if not directly controls OpenAI at this point. So you really have an OpenAI Microsoft situation, and then Google DeepMind are the two sort of heavyweights in this arena.
We have souls, and that makes us sentimental and reflective. It gives us a moral sense, longings. Can a machine ever have those things? Can a machine be sentimental? Can it appreciate beauty?
Well, I mean, we're getting into some philosophical areas that are hard to resolve. I take somewhat of a scientific view of things, which is that we might have a soul or we might not have a soul. I don't know. It feels like I feel like I've got some sort of consciousness that exists on a plane that is not the one we observe.
Yes.
That is certainly how I feel, but it could be an illusion. I don't know. But for AI, in terms of understanding beauty, there's a difference from appreciating beauty and being able to create incredibly beautiful art.
Yes.
Will AI be able to create incredibly beautiful art? It already does.
Yes, I know.
If you see some of the Mid-Journey,
I have.
this stuff, it's incredible.
It is.
No question that it can create art that we perceive as stunning, really. It's doing sort of still images now, but it won't be long before it's doing movies and shorts and movies, just a series of frames with audio.
But at that point, because it can mimic people and voices, any image, it can mimic reality itself so effectively.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you have a criminal trial? I mean, how could you ever believe that evidence was authentic, for example? And I don't mean like in 30 years, I mean like next year. I mean, that seems totally disruptive to all of our institutions.
But I'm not so worried. I think it's more like, will humanity control its destiny or not? Will we have a future that is better than the past or not?
The only advantage human beings have or have ever had is they're the smartest beings on the planet. But soon that will not be true. In fact, like next week. So when AI becomes stronger than we are, what do you do exactly? And what does it mean for democracy? We asked Elon Musk about contingency plans for dealing with advanced general intelligence. You've heard people say we should just blow up the server farms because there's no way to, once this gets rolling, there's no way to slow it down. What do you think of that?
Well, the really heavy-duty intelligence is not going to be distributed all over the place. It'll be in a limited number of server centers. If you say like very sort of deep AI, heavy-duty AI, it's not going to be in your laptop or your phone. It's going to be in a situation where there's like 100,000 really powerful computers working together in a server center. So it's not like subtle, and there are a limited number of places where that can happen. In fact, you can just look at the heat signature from space, yeah. And it'll be very obvious. I'm not suggesting we go and blow up to server centers right now, but there may be it may be wise to have some sort of contingency plan where the government's got an ability to shut down power to these server centers. Like you don't have to blow it up; you can just cut the power.
And what would trip?
Or cut connectivity as well. That's another way.
Right.
Yeah.
But what would trip that switch, do you think, in your mind? What would be the threshold that you'd have to pass to warrant the government cutting off your power or cutting off your signal?
Well, I mean, I guess if we lost control of some super AI, like for some reason, like the things that would normally work to do a passive shutdown, like the administrator passwords, if they somehow stop working, where we can't slow down or I'm not sure. I don't have a precise answer, but if there's something that we're concerned about, and are unable to stop it with software commands, then we'll probably want to have some kind of hardware off switch.
Yes.
I think, can't hurt.
Have you talked to, since you know Larry
have one,
Page, and you obviously know the OpenAI guys because you started it.
Definitely have one.
Have you talked to the people who run the biggest AI companies about this recently?
I haven't talked to Larry Page in a few years because he got very upset with me about OpenAI. So when OpenAI was created, it did shift things into from a unipolar world where Google and DeepMind controlled, like I said, 3/4 of all AI talent, to where there's now a sort of bipolar world, or OpenAI and Google DeepMind, and now weirdly, it seems OpenAI is maybe ahead. So I have had conversations with the OpenAI team, Sam Altman. I haven't talked to Larry Page because he doesn't want to talk to me anymore for a few years.
Can I ask you just about, since you've been around a lot of this, the thinking? So why would anyone not be a speciesist, be human-centered in his thinking about technology? Like, what's the thinking there?
I think what he's trying to say is that, if I were to guess, that all consciousness should be treated equally, and whether that is digital or biological.
And you disagree?
I disagree, yeah. Especially if the digital consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, digital intelligence, decides to curtail the biological intelligence.
Right. So you're just building your own slave master, and why would you do that?
Doesn't sound great. Yeah, I mean, we should at least, we no need to rush, you know. Like, what's the hurry? Where's the fire?
Tell us about the hurry. So I know you've been talking about this for years, and on the sort of the periphery of our attention, we've heard Elon Musk talking about AI. But for most people, it's been like 3 months since they've had any interaction with this at all. So what's the timeline here? At what point does it start to really change our society, do you think?
I think it starts to have probably an impact this year. GPT-4, now it's like writing poetry, and
pretty decent poetry, actually.
Pretty decent. Its skill at rhyming is incredible.
Yes, yes, and it's coherent.
Yes, it is. It's even got a narrative.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So you could say
that's hard to do.
Like most humans can't do that.
That's true.
So it's already past the point of what most humans can do. Most humans cannot write as well as ChatGPT. And no human can write that well, that fast, as to the best of my knowledge. So maybe Shakespeare.
How can you have a democracy with technology like that? I mean, if democracy is, government by the people, each person's vote is equal to every other person's vote. I mean, and people are choosing their votes freely. Can you have a democracy with this?
Well, that's why I raised the concern of AI being a significant influence in elections. And even if you say that AI doesn't have agency, well, it's very likely that people will use the AI as a tool in elections. And then, if the AI is smart enough, are they using the tool, or is the tool using them? So I think things are getting weird, and they're getting weird fast. If you increase the money supply, you get inflation.
Right.
So there's not some magical cure for getting rid of inflation, except to increase the productivity, the output of goods and services. So if you say like what is money? You've got these sort of it's basically numbers in a database that sum up to some total. Then you've got the output of goods and services of the economy, and as long as the ratio of money to ratio of goods and services stays, if that stays constant, you have no inflation. If you add more money, if you add money to the system faster than you increase goods and services,
right,
then you have inflation. So all of these COVID sort of stimulus bills were not paid for. They just generated more currency, more money was created because the federal government, the checks always pass, unless you hit a debt limit, which there's probably going to be some debt limit crisis later this year. But provided you haven't hit the debt limit, the federal government, unlike state governments or city governments or individuals, can simply issue more money, and that's what they did. As the old saying goes, that there's no free lunch. So if you could just issue massive amounts of money without negative consequences, why don't we just take that to the limit and make everyone a trillionaire? They tried that in Venezuela. How'd that work out?
Well, they had to eat zoo animals.
Right, it's not good, There's no free lunch. There's not some ability to issue money and not have inflation. To the best of my knowledge, we see no evidence of conscious life anywhere in the universe. So it might be there. Physics they call sort of the Fermi paradox. After when Enrico Fermi was an amazing physicist, asked the fundamental question: where are the aliens?
Yeah.
A lot of people ask me, where are the aliens? And I think if anyone would know about aliens on Earth, it would probably be me.
I would think.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with space stuff, and I've seen no evidence of aliens. So I would immediately tweet it out. It says split second. That'll be like one all time, probably the top tweet of all time. I found one, guys. It's a jackpot. This is some 8 billion likes. Next level jackpot if you find the aliens. Like, I don't think they're keeping this under, and it was like some general, I think in the 60s, where they said like, show us the aliens, like Area 51, etc. And he said like, listen, we're constantly trying to get the defense budget to expand, and you know what would really get no arguments from anyone? If we pulled out an alien and said, we need money to protect ourselves from these guys. How much money do you want? You got it. They look dangerous. So the fastest way to get a defense budget increase would be for me to pull out an alien, We're like, yeah, I mean, that could be the invasion fleet, could be arriving any minute, who knows? So, so I digress, but
you were saying that our consciousness makes us unique in the universe as far as we know, and that we take
yes,
it for
I'm not saying
granted.
that we are unique. I'm simply stating, to the best of my knowledge, that there is no evidence for other conscious life. I hope there is, and I hope they're peaceful. Obviously, the two important characteristics. But I'm just saying we haven't seen anything yet. So.
Yeah. But you think that we take our existence here for granted?
Yeah, I think
there are threats to it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just think we should not assume that civilization is robust. And if you look at the history of civilizations, the rise and fall of the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Sumerians, Rome, there's throughout the world there've been a rise and fall of many civilizations. So there's an arc. There's sort of a life cycle arc to civilizations, just as there is to individual humans.
Yes.
And I think we just want to make sure that we have civilization go onward and upward. And that's, for example, why I'm concerned about decreasing birth rates and the fact that, for example, Japan had twice as many deaths last year as births. So that's and they're a leading indicator.
Can I say, and you've written and talked a lot about this, but can I just ask you to pause just for a parenthetical note? Why is that? I mean, the urge to have sex and to procreate is, after breathing and eating, the most basic urge.
Yes.
How has it been subverted?
Well, it's just in the past we could rely upon simple limbic system rewards
Yes.
in order to procreate. But once you have birth control and abortions and whatnot, now you can still satisfy the limbic instinct but not procreate. So we haven't yet evolved to deal with that, because this is all fairly recent, the last 50 years or so, for birth control. So I'm sort of worried that, hey, civilization, if we don't make enough people to at least sustain our numbers, perhaps increase a little bit, then civilization is going to crumble. There's the old question of like, will civilization end with a bang or a whimper? Well, it's currently trying to end with a whimper in adult diapers.
Yes.
Which is depressing as hell.
The most depressing.
I mean, seriously, yeah.
War is less depressing.
Yeah, I'd rather go out with a bang.
Yeah, and with your shoes on.
Yeah,
not with your
more
diaper.
exciting.
The U.S. very much has the most advanced AI. So this is, you say like China's close behind, certainly, and has the resources to scale and to optimize. The biggest single advances in AI still come from the U.S. and Europe. Anyway, so it's hard to give an exact number or score. It's more like.
But there's a big gap still.
There's a gap. That gap looks like it's on the order of 12 months. It's hard to tell. I suspect it will narrow to some degree.
Can you talk a little bit about, you've created a new AI company yourself. Obviously there's a huge amount of energy and activity in this space. or at least
Yeah.
it's been talked about. I mean, what do you want to do yourself in this space beyond Tesla and the stuff you talked about earlier? What is that new thing?
Well, I think there should be a significant third horse in the race here. We've got OpenAI and Microsoft, Google DeepMind, and probably there should be a third horse in the race. So there'll be more on that soon.
But is it something that will interact with the data of Twitter and the capability of Tesla? Is it something that tries to bring what you've talked about earlier in terms of capability together and become that third player? Is that what you're talking about?
To some degree, I don't want to jump the gun here on announcements, but OpenAI has a relationship with Microsoft that seems to work fairly well. It's possible that XAI and Twitter and Tesla would have something similar.
Possible. You've talked about the importance of regulation, and you called for this moratorium. I mean, the history of regulating tech has been checkered. It's been very hard for regulators to keep up with tech, let alone get ahead of it. What do you think actually needs to happen that practically could in this space to try to change that? Because obviously the history of this is not encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I think there should be, I've been pushing hard for a long time. I met with a number of senior senators and people in Congress and the White House to advocate for AI regulation, starting with an insight committee that is formed of independent parties as well as perhaps participants from the leaders in industry, and that oversight committee gains, or I should say, that insight committee gains insight into what various companies are up to, and to the degree that there's competitive dynamics there, you can obviously you would sequester board members who are perhaps have conflicts. But anyway, you figure out some sort of regulatory board, and they start off gaining insight, and then have proposed rulemaking, and then that will get commented on by industry, and then hopefully we have some sort of oversight rules that improve safety, just as we do with aircraft with the FAA and spacecraft, and cars with NHTSA, and food and drugs with the Food and Drug Administration.
Right. And how would that work in such a global thing as we're talking about, where AI and the relative advance between countries is going to be very, very important? Is that something that is globalizable? Is that?
Well, really, the key question is, will China, cooperate with the West? That remains to be seen. But I would still advocate some degree of oversight. I mean, we have regulatory oversight of aircraft, for example, and yet the U.S. is still very much doing great on the aircraft front. So it makes more aircraft than any other place. So just because you have FAA regulation doesn't mean that it's necessarily slowed down very much.
Okay. So your view would be that the AI changes today lock in the tech giants, the Microsofts and the Googles of this world. Is there also a scenario where it actually helps to bring in new players and change that dynamic, or is that a much more unlikely outcome?
Well, there are a lot of AI startups. The thing that's becoming tricky is that you really need three things to compete. You need talented people. You need a lot of compute, expensive compute, and you need access to data. So whoever's succeeding on those three will win. So now that the cost of compute has gotten astronomical, so it's now, kind of sort of minimum ante, I would say, minimum would be $250 million of server hardware. Minimum. That's just to relevant anyway.
So the startups are more likely to piggyback off what the others are doing rather than compete directly themselves, is what you're saying.
Yeah, to train a big
Are you going to take a SpaceX trip yourself?
to train a model of probably GPT-5 size, I wouldn't be surprised if they use at least 30,000, maybe 50,000 H100s, which are the latest GPUs. Is not quite the right word, but the latest technology from NVIDIA. And then you need to run inference as well. So it's a lot of the GPUs are at this point considerably harder to get than drugs. Actually, that's really not a high bar in San Francisco.
You can tell us more about that later, but yeah. A couple of things I just wanted to go into on AI, which I'd love your perspective on. What does it mean for society in terms of, is this going to embed wealth and power in a very small subset and create a big widening of inequality? Is it going to democratize and create the opposite? What is your sense of where this heads?
In terms of access to goods and services, I think AI will be ushering an age of abundance. Assuming that we're in a benign AI scenario, I think the AI will be able to make goods and services very inexpensively. And so in anything that is a product or a service where there's not artificial scarcity created, such as like, I want to live exactly in this neighborhood of houses. It's like, okay, well, there's only 100 houses there, so that would still have scarcity. Or a unique artwork would have scarcity. But anything that does not have scarcity, that we deliberately designed to be scarce, will be plentiful for everyone in a benign scenario.
And in the unbenign scenario?
Well, there's a wide range of.
But what's the thing that you're most worried about when you look at, when you've been talking for years about the need for regulation? What is the scenario that really keeps you up at night?
Well, I don't think the AI is going to try to destroy all humanity, but it might put us under strict controls. And there's no non-zero chance of it going Terminator. It's not 0%, but it's. I think it's a small likelihood of annihilating humanity, but it's not zero. We want that probability to be zero, as close to zero as possible. And then, like I said, the of AI assuming control for the safety of all the humans and taking over all the computing systems and weapon systems of Earth, and effectively being like some sort of Uber nanny.
But isn't another scenario?
If you say that AI, let's say you're a Miss World contestant, hypothetically.
It's unlikely. Let's face it. But
and you say, what do you want? And it's I want world peace. It's like, okay, well, one way to achieve world peace is to take all the weapons away from the humans, so they can no longer use them, and to punish any humans that engage in extraterritorial activity.
But isn't the more likely nasty outcome that rather than AI taking over and being the ultimate nanny that keeps us all doing stuff that is super safe and it wants us to, that actually somebody nefariously harnesses that power to achieve shuttle control, stroke military superiority, and that actually some country around the world decides to use it in a different way?
Yes, that's what I mean by AI uses as a weapon. And the pen is mightier than the sword. So one of the first places we have to be careful of AI being used is in social media to manipulate public opinion. So the reason that Twitter is going to a primarily subscriber-based system is because it is dramatically harder to create. It's like 10,000 times harder to create an account that has a verified phone number from a credible carrier, that has a credit card, and that pays a small amount of money per month, and have those credit cards and phone numbers be highly distributed, not clustered, is incredibly difficult. So whereas in the past, someone could create a million fake accounts for a penny apiece, and then manipulate, have something appear to be very, very much liked by the public when in fact it is not, or promoted and retweeted when in fact it is not, this popularity is not real, and essentially game the system. So the bias towards a subscription-based verification, I think, is very powerful, and that really you won't be able to trust any social media company that does not do this, because it will simply be overrun with bots to such an extreme degree.
So if we take it back to where we started, if you look at the election that's coming up, how big a role will this big shift in AI capability over the last few months, which will obviously continue through the next year, how big an impact is this going to play, do you think, in the messaging and the way that people get told the different pitches of the candidates?
I think that's something we need to be on the lookout for in a big way, is to make sure that we're minimizing the impact of AI manipulation. We're certainly very much taking that seriously at X Twitter, X/Twitter, and I think we're putting in place all of the protections to minimize and certainly detect when we see large-scale manipulation of the system.
But beyond Twitter, are you worried about this for the election in general?
Yeah. There probably will be attempts to use AI to manipulate the public, and some of it will be successful. And if not this election, for sure the next one.
Okay, I've got two more questions on AI, if you've got the time, and then just a little bit on China and Tesla, if that's okay. The first thing is, we talk a lot in terms of AI about the next 5 to 10 years and what the impact is going to be on jobs and some of these things. If you look out on a much longer time frame, given the speed and scale of the change, and you look to your grandkids and great-grandkids, can you just give us a sense of what it's going to be like to be human? How much is this going to change the fundamental nature of how we operate as a race at this point?
I think it's going to change a lot. Especially if you go further out into the future. I mean, there will be, everything will be automatic. I mean, there'll be household robots that you can fully talk to as though they're people that can help you around the house or be a companion or whatever the case may be. There will be humanoid robots throughout, factories, and cars will also be all automatic. And anything that where intelligence can be applied, even modest intelligence, will be automated. Certainly if you say like 10, 20 years from now.
And will we be connected to that technology through a Neuralink type device?
Maybe.
I mean, is that where this, in your view, obviously, is that where this heads?
Well, a high bandwidth interface from Cortex to your sort of computing or AI tertiary layer, which already exists. It's just that we don't have a high bandwidth connection. We've got our limbic system, which is our sort of foundational element. That's sort of our instincts and desires and whatnot. Then our cortex on top of that, which is our thinking part of our brain. And then we have a tertiary digital layer, which is currently in the form of our phones and computers and laptops and whatnot, and all the applications. And the constraint on better merging or the constraint on having human interests and machine interests be aligned is the bandwidth, especially the output. So if you say, like, at what speed can you output to a computer? It's using voice or your fingers, which move very slowly. So you're talking about maybe 10 bits per second or some fairly small data rate. So with the neural link, you can increase that by, increase that by 1 million, probably.
So everything just speeds up.
Speeds up, yeah. I mean, this is obviously in a relatively benign scenario, because there's a question of not just, let's say it's a benign scenario. How do we even appreciate or understand what the computer's doing? How do we go along for the ride? And if we have a brain-machine interface that's, I don't know, 1 million times faster, then we're more like we'll go along for the ride a lot better than if we're interfacing with a phone using 2 slow-moving meat sticks.
If you put it like that. And in terms of, you have a lot of kids, many in this room have kids, what skills do they need to have? What are the 3 skills that you think are most important for them, that you're trying to give them to be prepared and well positioned for this new world?
Well, I think it's important to have a broad range of understanding in many different subjects. So I think general knowledge is important. So you at least have some clue of what you don't know in different areas. And then go deep in areas where your child has a strong interest and ability. So finding that overlap of where is my child both interested in this and has some ability to be successful, then if you can find that Venn diagram overlap, then obviously encouraging that is a good thing. And we are obviously headed to a high-tech world, so some basic understanding of computers and software and artificial intelligence is probably a good idea.
But the actual broad thrust of, jobs will change, but it'll be more AI enabling and making it better and easier, rather than wholesale, complete change of the skills you need.
I mean, it depends on what time frame we're talking about here. So if you say, like, over a 20, 30-year time frame, I think things will be transformed beyond belief. You probably won't recognize society in 30 years. I do think we're fairly close. You asked me about artificial general intelligence. I think we're perhaps only 3 years, maybe 6 years away from it this decade. So, in fact, arguably we are on the event horizon of the black hole that is artificial intelligence.